Okay, good morning everybody and Hazak Ubaruch. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Friday morning, Erev Shabbat, as we are getting ready for Parashat Vaera. Today's class is sponsored anonymously for the Refuah Shlema of all of Am Yisrael. If you'd like to sponsor any one of these classes, please notify us. You can email us info@ejsny.org. Rabotai, Parashat Vaera, we have to actually go back to the beginning for this class. We didn't discuss the beginning of our Parashat yet this week. The name of the parasha is Parashat Vaera. Vaera means to appear. Let's begin. Vaydaber Elohim el Moshe. God spoke to Moshe. Vayomer elav ani Adonai. He says to him, I am God. Vaera el Avraham el Yitzchak ve'el Yaakov. And I appeared to Abraham, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov with my name, Kel Shaddai. Be'el Shaddai, Ushmi Adonai lo nodati lahem. And I never appeared to them with my other name of Yud K Vav K. Okay? And God over here is actually to appreciate what's going on. God's in the middle of a conversation over here with Moshe from already last week. Last week, God sends Moshe to Paro to free and redeem the Jewish people from Mizrahi. Okay, well, Moshe goes in, he speaks to Paro. Paro says, no, sorry, not happening. Not only doesn't he free them, but he intensifies the work. He makes it even more difficult for them. They now have to go and find their own straw. So the people are exhausted, the people are upset, and they basically are like, all right, Moshe, thanks for nothing, man. Okay, and now Moshe is also upset. Moshe, it hurts him that the Jews are suffering. Let's not forget that when he was a prince in Paro's palace, he didn't just hang out and let the Jews suffer. He went out there into the heat, into the sun, and he suffered with them. So Moshe is hurt. What does he do? He goes over and he complains to God. So really, our parasha is in the middle of a conversation. Vayashov Moshe Lashem. You have to go back to the last week's parasha, 3 verses ago. And Moshe says to God, why did you do evil to this people? Why did you send me here? From the moment that I came to Paro, it just got worse for them. And then God says, Vayomer Hashem and Moshe. Last week still, God says to Moshe, Atatire, now you will see what I will do to Paro. He will send them out with a strong hand. Now our parasha begins. Vaydaber Elohim el Moshe. And then God continues and says to Moshe, Ani Hashem, I am God. Vaera el Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. I appeared to Avraham, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov. And over here, what exactly is God trying to say to Moshe with this preface to his sentence? You know, Moshe, I appeared to the Avot. Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. I went to them also, and I'm not. What exactly is okay? Yes. So you appear to them, and what's your message? So God's message is very simple. Okay, God is saying to Moshe, and this is the Midrash. Take a look at what the Midrash says, and this is Rashi on Pasuk Vav. Haval al de'avdin ve'la mishtakechin. God is saying to Moshe, whoa. How are you talking to me? What? Am I hearing this correctly? What happened to the Avot? I miss the Avot, Moshe. Those were the good old days. Those were really righteous people. Can't find people like that anymore today. Why were the Avot better than Moshe? Says Midrash, Harbe pe'amim nigleti le'Avraham. I appeared to Avraham many times. To Yitzchak, to Yaakov. And not once did they ever question my methods. You know, I said to Avraham that this land is yours. I want you to walk the length and width of the land of Israel. One day you will own this. And yet when Avraham had to bury his wife Sarah in the very land that I promised him, how much did he have to pay? Who remembers? How much did Avraham pay for the Me'arat HaMachpelah? He had to buy it for a lot of money, right? 400 shekel kesef. And yet, this would have been a very, very opportune time for Avraham to complain to God. God, what are you doing to me? I thought you promised me the land. Now I have to buy a tiny piece for 400 shekel, a lot of money at the time. But Avraham doesn't complain. Amarti leYitzchak gur ba'aretz hazot ki lecha ozaracha. Yitzchak, same thing. I promised him the land. And yet he wanted to drink water. Velo matzah. And he had to fight all the battles that we know. The only thing that we know about Yitzchak is that he fought over wells time and time again. And Yitzchak, very easy for him to complain. Did he complain? Yitzchak didn't complain. Yaakov, I told him the land that you're going to sleep on is yours. He wanted to pitch his tent. He had to buy from Me'ah Kesita. And again, he doesn't complain. So Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, none of them complained, Moshe. When I told them to do something, when I made them promises, even though the promises weren't kept in their lifetime, they had full belief in me. I miss those people. You, Moshe, one mission I give you. Tehilat shlihuti. One mission. And all of a sudden you're complaining. I send you to go do one thing, and we barely have a relationship, and you're already questioning me. And this is God's complaint to Moshe. This is why he's comparing and contrasting Moshe to the Avot. Okay? And the truth is, this needs to be understood. Because you can't really compare the two. Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, yes, they were promised something, but they didn't complain because the difficulty, the challenges, the suffering was something that they themselves were experiencing. And so they didn't have really maybe it wouldn't have been appropriate for such people on their caliber to complain to God for personal suffering. But why is Moshe complaining over here? Who is Moshe complaining for? Is it his own suffering that he's complaining for? Is he crying for his own labor that he's going to have to do? No. He's complaining on behalf of Am Yisrael. Isn't that a leader's job? Isn't that something that he's supposed to do? Isn't a leader there and he's supposed to be the advocate on behalf of the people? So what is God's comparison of Moshe to the Avot? Moshe is in the right. He's supposed to do that. That's his job. Not only that, but when you go to the Chet HaEgel, the Jewish people, when they're about to do a worse sin, and God is going to wipe them out, what does Moshe say? Lama yehere apecha be'amecha. God, why are you angry with your people? Did God get angry with Moshe over there? Not at all. Moshe was right to defend his people. And God says, Moshe, okay, you're right. Good for you. You're doing your job as a leader. So a leader's job is to defend his sheep. So Moshe here is doing only that. So what is God's problem with Moshe? The answer is, the issue that God has with Moshe is not that he's defending them. You want to defend them? You want to fight for them? By all means. I have one problem. And that is your choice of words. Moshe, defend them all day. Fight for them all day. That's your job as a leader. But the fact that you use the words, Lama hareota la'am hazeh, with that I have issues, says God. To use the words hareota, to use the words ra, to use the words evil in the same sentence, you, Moshe, should know better. You could argue for them. You could say, God, could we maybe make it easier? God, could we try to maybe figure out a different... But to say, God, why did you do bad to them? You, Moshe, of all people, should know Kol de'avid rahamana letav avid, that everything that I do, everything that comes from Hashem, is ultimately for the best. And Moshe is punished here, not because he fights for the Jews, not because he complains, but because he uses the word ra. And actually, our rabbis point out something very interesting. Moshe here actually has two complaints. Number one, why did you do evil? Why did you send me? But also, Moshe is saying that God, over here, there's a very big chilul Hashem going on. You know, you sent me in your name to go free the people. Now everyone's talking about you. You're the talk of the town. There's a whole commotion going on about, oh, God, Hashem, this new God in town. And then it ends up being a flop. And Paro doesn't free us. It just gets even worse for the Jews. And you just created your own Chilul Hashem. You're making it look bad for yourself. Why are you doing this? These are the two complaints that Moshe has. And God is okay with that second complaint. The Chilul Hashem, God says, don't worry. I'll worry about the Chilul Hashem. And really last week, if you go back to this conversation, it looks like it's two separate sentences, but it's really one conversation that God has with Moshe from the end of last week's parasha to the beginning of this week's parasha. It's the same sentence. And read it like that, although there's a week in between the two. But last week, God, right? Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, and Hashem says to Moshe, now you will see what I will do to Paro. And he continues, Vaydaber Elohim el Moshe. That's where our parasha begins. But it's back to back. And if you notice, God spoke last week using his name of Hashem, Vayomer Hashem. Yet this week it says Vaydaber Elohim, because these are addressing the two different complaints of Moshe. Last week, Vayomer Hashem is a soft way of speaking. Amira, Amar, Vayomer. Hashem is God's name of mercy. God is saying softly to Moshe, don't worry, Moshe. You will see what I will do to Paro. Don't worry about the Chilul Hashem. That was last week. And now he's addressing Moshe's second complaint, that it got bad. Lama hareota. And for this is why God gets angry. This is why God doesn't have tolerance for Moshe anymore over here. And that's why it says Vaydaber Elokim, which is a stronger language. Dibur is tough. Elokim is also tough. Vaydaber Elokim. You want to say bad, Moshe, for that, you're going to have to be censored. And Moshe is here being compared to the Avot and lacking a little bit of faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay? Now, there's something very interesting that we have to address for a minute. Take a look at Rashi on the opening of our parasha, where God says, Vaera el Avraham, el Yitzchak, ve'el Yaakov. And I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Now watch this. Rashi, whenever he's quoting and explaining a pasuk, he'll first quote the pasuk in bold letters, okay? They made it easy for us. They put it in bold letters. And then he elaborates on the pasuk. Now open up a Rashi. You'll see something very interesting. Vaera el, what should it say? Vaera, and I appeared, God says to Moshe, and I appeared to, what should it say now? What does the pasuk say? Vaera el Avraham, el Yitzchak, ve'el Yaakov. That's what it should say. But look at Rashi. Rashi says, Vaera el ha'avot. And I appeared to the Avot. Do you notice that Rashi here is deviating from the text? Rashi is making up his own pasuk. Rashi says, not like the pasuk says it, Vaera el Avraham el Yitzchak ve'el Yaakov, but Rashi decides to be over here to save space. And he writes, instead of all three, he writes ha'avot. What gives Rashi the right to do that? Why is Rashi deviating and changing from the wording of the pasuk and picking his own words? Now some say it was a copywriter that actually did this. Some say Rashi probably wrote the whole sentence the right way, and then he elaborated and explained it. And the one who was copying it, typing it, just to save room, for the sake of brevity, decided to write Avot. Okay? Maybe that's an answer. Okay? But I find it hard to believe that every Chumash went with this saving space and modified Rashi. We don't find this by anywhere else really. You don't find there's many titles or headings that we could abbreviate and save space on. We don't usually do that. And so the question that we're going to try to figure out today is, why does Rashi write Vaera And instead of writing the full three names, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, he writes El Ha'avot. Okay, the first answer is a beautiful answer from the Hatam Sofer. Let me ask you a question, and feel free to please write in your answers. What does Avot mean? The Avot. What does it mean, the Avot? Well, fathers, right? Abba is dad, and Avot are dads, plural. So Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov are our fathers, plural, right? But my question really is, what I mean to ask, what does the word Abba come from? What does it mean, Av? So the Hatam Sofer says something very, very interesting. He says that Avot comes from the word Ava. What does Ava mean? Ava means to want, right? Like it says in the Perashah, Velo Ava Paro. Paro didn't want to send to free the Jewish people. So an Av is to want, to desire. What God is saying to Moshe is, you know why I spoke to them? You know why I appeared to them? You know why Vaera el Avraham el Yitzchak el Yaakov? Because they wanted to have a relationship with me. Because Avot, they desired a relationship. And the first step, this is a very powerful message from God and the Perashah to us. First step of having a relationship with Hashem. You know, we all want a relationship with Hashem. We all want to have that ability to meditate and to get into that zone. You know how you get it? Step number one is you got to want it. But you got to really want it. You got to desire it. Vaera el ha'avot. The way we get Hashem in our lives is we have to want Hashem in our lives. We know that in a marriage, our rabbis tell us, ish ve'isha, husband and wife, if they merit, they're going to have God in their marriage. And if they don't merit, they're going to have a hell of a marriage. They're going to have fire. They're going to have fighting. And what's very interesting, and everyone says this at every Sheva Brachot speech somewhere, right? Ish has the letter Yud, and Isha has the letter Hey. Besides for that, it's the same letters, Ish, Aleph, Shin, Isha, Aleph, Shin, except for the Yud and the Hey. Yud and Hey is Hashem's name. If you take the Yud and you put it in the Ish, you take the Hey, you put it in the Isha, then you have God in a marriage, and they'll have a beautiful, harmonious marriage, Ish and Isha. And if you take God out of the relationship, it's going to be Ish and Ish, fire and more fire, fighting and more fighting. Okay, beautiful. So you want to have God in your marriage, you want to have God in your business, you want to have God in your life. The advice of the Perashah is Avot. Ava, to want. You want God in your life, you have to want the relationship. But it's not enough, my friends, to want God in your marriage. Because you could want all day a good marriage. But if you want your marriage to succeed, there's a very crucial next step to take. It's not enough to desire, you have to also do. We have to take steps to make it a reality. We have to demonstrate that we're working on that relationship. You want a successful marriage? It's not enough to avot, but take a look at the avot. Abraham didn't just want a relationship with God. He actually did something. He was the pillar, he was the amud of chesed, of kindness. Abraham took that desire and he manifested it. He did something to concretize it, to make it into something that was tangible. Yitzchak, he didn't just want a relationship, but he took that emotion, he took those feelings and he transferred them and he brought them out in a way of prayer, of avodah, of tefillah. Yaakov, he didn't just want, but he learned. So if we want a relationship with God, we have to do something like the avot, whether it's through areas of chesed or through tefillah or through Torah, and not exclusively. I don't mean that you should only do one. Of course not. A Jew must have all three. And no doubt Avraham had all three, and Yitzchak had all three, and Yaakov had all three. But each one specialized. We have to specialize. We have to figure out, what am I doing to enhance my relationship with God? What am I doing to enhance my relationship with my wife? I can't just want to have a good marriage. I can't just be optimistic and hopeful that it'll be good. What am I doing to further and to advance that relationship with my spouse? How am I working on my relationship? What am I doing to spend time? What am I doing to maybe sacrifice? Because there's no healthy or successful anything without a sacrifice. You can't have a healthy body without sacrificing on foods. You can't have strong muscle without sacrificing and hitting the gym. You can't have a good business without sacrificing certain pleasures in order to help that business and flourish it. Every relationship that we ever want to advance will require hard work. And so avot, ava, first you have to desire and want it, but it's not enough. You got to work for it. So that is the Hatam Sofer's answer of why exactly Rashi, instead of writing Avot, Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, instead he writes Avot. Beautiful. To teach us this very important lesson of Ava in life, you got to want it. There is another answer brought down from Rav Meir Permish Lener. Rav Meir Permish Lener, Hasidic Rav, and he says that if you pay attention, you'll notice that each one of our forefathers, Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, like we just mentioned, each one served God, but in a different way. You know, Avraham, he was known for chesed. He brings people into his tent. Everywhere he goes, he's setting up eshel. He's planting an eshel. Eshel is an acronym for achila, shetiyah, lina, for eating, drinking, sleeping. Avraham was all about hosting and hospitality. We learn Hachnasat Orchim from him. Every story about Avraham is kindness. He's even praying for the wicked people of Sodom. Avraham represents the pillar of kindness. Yitzchak, he charted his own path to Hashem. Yitzchak wasn't the biggest chesed guy. He wasn't. I'm sure he did chesed, but that's not what he was known for. Yitzchak was the Amud Ha'avodah. He was the pillar of service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He found his own way and his own path to serve God. Yitzchak, chesed wasn't his thing. He found a different way of serving. He decided to serve God through discipline, through work, through prayer, through meditation, through tefillah. Yaakov comes into the scene. How does he serve God? He didn't pick chesed, he don't pick avodah. He finds a third. He serves God through Torah learning, through the mitzvot. That's how he serves Hashem. And again, each one of the Avot for sure did all of the above. But the message here is so powerful. You know, Yitzchak, think about Yitzchak for a second. He comes into the scene and he could say, you know what? I got good pedigree. I got good yichus. I come from a good family. My father's Avraham. My mother is Sarah. I have a good last name. I'm this. I'm that. You know, Lebanese, Syrian, Morocco, whatever you want, right? I come from good people. And Yitzchak could have said that and could have cruised his way through life, and he would have, piggybacked on all of the accomplishments of his father. But Yitzchak didn't do that. Yitzchak wasn't just great because of who his father was. Yitzchak was great in his own right. Yitzchak said, my father was big, but I also need to be big. I need to figure out how I can make it on my own. I want to have my own legacy. I want to create my own yichus, my own pedigree. And so Yitzchak comes onto the scene. And he could have pointed to Avraham and said, well, if I'm his son, then I'm also big in my own right. But no. I'm going to create greatness for myself. And even if his father wasn't one of the Avot, Yitzchak was an Av because he earned it and he deserved to be an Av. Some people are not huge. They're not big rabbis, but they're the son of a very big rabbi. And whenever they come over, they ask for money and they say, look, my father was so-and-so. And they're piggybacking off of the zechuyot of their father. Some people, they come and they want to do business with you. And they say, listen, my father was this big businessman. So please do business with me. I'm his son. And they use the credit of their predecessors, of their ancestry. But Yitzchak was great because he was his own Av, not because he was the son of Avraham. Yaakov, he could have came and said, I'm the grandson of Avraham, I'm the son of Yitzchak. He could have been flowing, enjoying, the money that he inherited from the Avot, so to speak. There are wealthy kids today. But if you put them out in the world by themselves without the money of their parents, they would be zero. They have zero skill. They have zero reason to make it in this world. They're not great in their own right. The only reason they're great is because their mother and father gave them a lot of money, and they're taking that money and they're lucky and they're just investing it and making the 10%, and that's it. But on their own, they accomplish nothing. It's not only in Torah or in God. It could be in money. It could be in any area of life. Some people point up and they say, look, this is who I come from, and therefore help me. My grandfather was this, my father was that, but they themselves have zero. They're nothing in their own right. And the Torah is telling us, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, each one of them was, Rashi says, an Avot. Vaera el Avot. Each one was great and they had their own merit. And by themselves they were standing as a strong Avot, as a strong father by themselves, even without the Zechuyot. In the Amidah we say this. Look at the first paragraph. It's very powerful. You'll never pray the same. The Pasuk says in the first paragraph in the Amidah, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Velokei Yaakov. The God of, we say God of ourselves, God Elokeinu, Velokei Avotenu, and the God of our forefathers, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, and Elokei Yaakov. And we repeat in the first paragraph of the Amidah, after already summarizing and saying Elokei Avotenu, but we then say Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. And the reason is because we are highlighting this idea that each one of the Avot were great on their own. Elokei Avraham, by himself, he would have been one of the Avot. Yitzchak alone was great. Yaakov by himself was great. To be able to figure out how we ourselves are going to find and chart out our own path to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to greatness in life, without being always having to turn back on and lean on our parents and use their credit card and use their merit. We have to use our own merit. There was once a fellow that was selling meat, and a guy walks into the store and he says, do you have a teudah? Do you have a symbol that you're kosher? This guy was a regular guy. He wasn't such a righteous guy. And the man says, do I have a teudah? Do I have a certification? I don't need a certification. Look on the wall. You see who that man is on the wall? That big rabbi? That was my father. So the guy says back, well, listen, with all due respect, if your father was standing here selling the meat and you were on the wall, then I would buy from you. But that's not the case. See, sometimes in life, we like to point and say, that was my father. That was my grandpa. I'm the great-great-grandson of this and this and this and this. And then we use that as an excuse to just waste our lives and never amount to anything. That's not what Yitzchak did. That's not what Yaakov did. Each one figured out how they can be. And some people will point, by the way, sorry to say this, I don't want to hurt anyone right now, but some people will point not only to their ancestors, but they'll point to their rabbi. They'll say, this is my rabbi. Such and such big rabbi. And I either give him money every month, or I listen to his classes every month, or I go to his synagogue on the high holidays every year, or I do this and this and that. And they point to the rabbi and they use that as their scapegoat to not have to be great in their own right. If this is my rabbi, then I'm part of my rabbi. And the message is no. You need to be big by yourself. Don't rely on other people. Don't just point to your ancestors. Each one of the Avot was their own Av. There's an amazing story of 5 great big Hasidic rabbis sitting together. Okay, 5 Hasidic guys, rabbis sitting together. They weren't so famous. They weren't such big rabbis. They were rabbis, but nothing special. And each one is sitting there and saying stories and dvar Torahs that they heard from their father or grandfather, who was also, in the Hasidic world, the rabbi is inherited. The Rebbe, he dies, he gives it to his son, and he dies, he gives it to his son. So you'll find many big rabbis that they're like in a big link. So these rabbis were sitting around, each one saying a dvar Torah, a beautiful thought, an idea that they heard from their father or their grandfather. And each one's going and saying a beautiful chidush. And finally, it's one of them. But the only thing, he was the only one out of the 5 that came from 0 pedigree. His father was a simple baker. Okay. So they turn to him and they say, what did your father ever teach you? Now this rabbi happened to be the biggest out of all of them. But again, he came from 0. He didn't have a big rabbi as a father. His father was a baker. He sold bread. So they say to him with a little smirk in their tone, so what about you? What did you learn? Which dvar Torah did your father teach you? And this Rebbe said back, well, my father was a baker, but he told me something very important. He told me that fresh bread is always better and healthier than old stale bread. Amazing. Fresh bread is always better than stale bread. So his message was very powerful, very sharp. You guys are old bread, you come from great people, but if you're stale, if you yourselves are not great in your own right, that's not as healthy, as strong as fresh bread. Even though the fresh bread is maybe not as old. But fresh bread is always better than stale bread. Okay? So that's something that we have to ask ourselves. Are we fresh or are we stale? Sometimes we become a little bit stale in our service of God. Stale in business. We just sit back and we rely on the money that we made in our earlier good old years. That's also not healthy. To always be vibrant, always alive, always putting our best foot forward. Always asking ourselves, I want to be better than I was yesterday. I want to be an Av. I want to be a father in my own right here, right now, today. I don't want to just point back at, I come from this great grandpa. He was this big tzaddik. And my great grandma was this lady who did. What am I? And this is what we say in the Azya Shir every single day. Take a look. We say in the Shirah, Ze Eli ve'anvehu. Elohei avi v'aromenu. We say on the one hand that this is the God of my father, Elokei Avi, but also Ze Eli. What's Eli? My God. Hashem has to be yours. You have to own Hashem. You have to figure out how you can make God yours. You have to figure out how you can make Torah yours. How you can make this class that you're listening to. If you're going to go afterwards and repeat it to somebody, but make it your class. Find your own chidush in it. You add your own spin to it. Yes, it's nice to be able to repeat and to spit out like a parrot what you heard and to give it over, but add your own. Elokei Avi. So of course, we have a tradition and we stay true to our tradition. We can't just go out and reform and change and just start new movements. We have to stay true to our old Avot, but we also have to find the chidush. We got to make it new. We got to make it ours. We got to own it. Fantastic. So this is Ze Eli ve'anvehu. But you know what? There's one more thing. There's another idea over here of why we are mentioning the Avot. Why is God even comparing Moshe to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov? Just say, Moshe, I'm very upset with you. I'm very upset at how you're talking. I'm very upset at how you're acting. I don't like your language. You're using bad language. Hareota, evil, and me in the same sentence. Moshe doesn't. But no. He's saying, you compared to the Avot. Why are you comparing him? Since when do we compare people in Judaism? Moshe, does he need to be compared? Let's say the Avot weren't there as a reference. Moshe can't just be told, hey Moshe, you can't talk like that. Why you got to put in perspective for him? Hey Moshe, look at them and compare it to you. Why do you got to do that for? And over here's another very important lesson. And this is the flip side of the coin. And the Torah is over here teaching us something else. And that is that no matter how great you are, even if you're Moshe Rabbeinu, even if you're the biggest tzaddik in the world, a person must always be able to look back at their avot. To always ask the following question, the question of, what would my father or mother say if they saw me doing this? And God is telling Moshe, take a look. Even you, it's not enough for you to say to yourself, I'm Moshe, I shouldn't do this. No. This is how you should think. I'm Moshe, and my father was Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And how would they react if they saw me talking like this? That's a very powerful and very different way of thinking. To always have the image of our parents in our mind. Anytime we're about to do something that may be inappropriate. Anytime we're about to say something that's inappropriate. Anytime that we're about to maybe eat or do or act. To try to envision my father, my mother looking at me. Try to imagine in the heavens, in the skies, the Avot right there, my parents sitting there watching me on a movie screen. How would my parents react if they were watching me? Imagine you're on camera and you're acting this all out, whatever you're about to go do, and your parents are watching you. And after 120, you're going to have to go out there and watch this movie with your parents together. How do we react? How do we feel? It'd be very embarrassing. We'd be filled with shame that we spoke in such a way or we did such a thing. And by the way, this is exactly what Yosef did, 100%. Correct. This is what Yosef did when he was about to sin with Potiphar. How did he talk himself out of such a horrible test? Can you imagine this test? The biggest test ever in history. Yosef HaTzadik. He's literally tempted by his mistress. He's about to do the worst sin possible. And he's alone. No one will catch him. Imagine how hard that test was for him. And what does he do? He passes that test. But how does he pass? He doesn't just say, I can't do it. I'm a big tzaddik. Our rabbis tell us he sees in the window the reflection of his father. Yosef asks himself, what would my father say? What would my mothers do? Would they approve? So Yosef was looking back at his avot. Moshe, you got to look back at your avot. Even you, Moshe, yes, even you, a big righteous tzaddik, that you're a big navi, bigger than them. But it's so powerful to be able to look back to the avot. And this is what we say, Shir lama'alot, Esa enai el harim. I raise my eyes to the harim. But our rabbis say, not only I raise my eyes to the mountains, but the word harim in Hebrew also can mean horim, my parents. The way to succeed in life, says David HaMelech, is to look up to our parents, to always have an image of them in the back of our mind, that they should always be in our conscious. We should always think, what would they say? What would they do? Would they approve? And so this is the message to Moshe Rabbeinu, is a double-sided coin. On the one hand, we got to be our own. We got to own our Judaism. We have to own our religion. We got to be great. We can't just have a big picture of our big rabbi or our big father or grandfather on the wall and say, look, this is my grandpa. We can't just say, look, I come from this great yichus. I come from this pedigree. No. We got to be great by ourselves. We have to figure out how we could be our own rabbi. Yitzchak was his own Av. Yaakov was his own Av. Each one by himself. That's on the one hand. But on the other hand, we don't completely disregard our Avot either. We don't say, I don't need them. I have my own greatness. And therefore, I disconnect from the past. No. You also need the Avot to always look back to them for guidance. To always look back to them and ask, how would they have done this? How would they have acted in this situation? What would they have said if they were looking at me right here, right now? And so we're always living. Ze Eli, this is my God, but also Elokei Avi va'aron b'menu. But it's also my Father's God. We cannot break away from that either. When we have these two both guiding and directing us in our lives, being able to balance, creating our own connection to Hashem, but also staying true to the tradition of our ancestors, we'll be able to be successful in our journey towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, everybody, we'll stop over here. Have a Shabbat Shalom. God willing, we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.